Fresh out the oven, it's Cinema Bums. I'm Wade.
And I'm Emmett.
Cinema Bums is a podcast where we watch through every single movie in popular film franchises, one each week, to try and track how the storytelling changes over time. Today we are beginning our new mini-series covering all the films in the Dirty Rotten Scoundrel series entitled Squeaky Clean Do-Gooders. We will fully spoil today's film, but we will not spoil any future entries in the series. Emmett, how are you doing?
I'm doing excellently. How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling good.
Good.
I'm feeling especially good because today we are honored to have not one, but two special guests.
Woo-woo!
They're actors, directors, singers. They're two of the co-founders of Happy Accident Theater in Atlanta. They're perhaps best known to our audience for, in 2021, still keeping Pokemon Go alive.
Yeah.
Please welcome Molly Penny and Zach Stolz.
I caught a legendary 2 hours ago. It was a great feeling.
Wait, what'd you catch?
It was so it's from like the Pearl generation, which I didn't play. It was like Thundurus or Landorus, but they have, which is like this legendary Pokemon that looks like the little dude hanging from the cloud with like the fishing pole in Mario Kart.
Lakitu.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Lakitu. We were in a reading of short vignettes of play based on Mario Kart by our friend Riley Rawson. Very fun.
It's the only reason why I know who Lakitu is.
Yeah, I was really taking a bet there because I was like, I haven't seen you guys in almost exactly a year. And I was like, are they still playing Pokemon Go?
Yes.
Sure.
I will
Sure
say
am.
I've definitely fallen behind. I've been distracted by other lovely lighthearted games, i.e. Animal Crossing New Horizons, but I'm working on getting back into Pokemon Go because I do love it. It's very good.
I love Animal Crossing.
What? Oh, okay.
Tell me about your island.
So I named it Kermit Cove because I love Kermit the Frog. And it's honestly, I haven't done a lot of like terraforming or restructuring so much as just going and hanging out and talking to my fellow islanders. And I collected all the fossils. So now I'm working on the fish and the bugs. My favorite islander, I think, is Celia. She's an eagle. I feel like the Animal Crossing, like the birds always look a little strange, but I love her. She's very, very sweet, so she's my favorite. I also have Kabuki, who is a cat.
He's my favorite.
And he has that
Love Kabuki so much.
Good. He has that like the sort of crotchety old man personality, which is fun. And then he is designed like a Kabuki mask. So he's a white cat with the red fiery sort of stripes, like Kabuki theater. So that's fun. But yes, yeah, my island is a good time. Makes me very happy.
I also got all of the fossils. Actually, just the other day, I finally got the one that I had been missing.
Yes, and that happened. It was like 2 days ago.
Yeah, it was maybe 2 days ago for me too. But I have done nothing for the fish or the bugs. I truly do not care about the fish. I cannot be bothered about it.
I am more interested in the fish than the bugs. I caught a butterfly the other day that I thought was new, like a new seasonal bug. It was not. I found it before. And I think that just goes to show you how much attention I pay to the bugs on my island.
There was that terrible fetch quest in Twilight Princess, Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, where you had to find all the bugs. Bugs in video games, man. Weird.
Ooh.
Terrible.
You don't have to do a lot of design work, I think, is part of it. This is me talking completely out of class. I have no idea. But I imagine, they're so small. How much detail do you have to put into it? In Animal Crossing, you can see individual blades of grass blowing in the breeze, while a gentle tune soothes your soul.
Sounds nice there.
It is nice. I think it would be very relaxing for you, Emmett.
I hate relaxing things. I am at 99.28% completion on Legend of Zelda Age of Calamity, so deal with that.
Okay, we are here to discuss the movie Bedtime Story from 1964. Molly, Zach, had either of you seen this movie before?
No.
I've not.
Definitely not.
Had you seen either either of the remakes, Dirty Rotten Scoundrels or The Hustle?
I saw Dirty Rotten Scoundrels like a long time ago. And then, like to the point where I'm more familiar with Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, the musical.
Oh, I had forgotten.
The movie.
It got turned into a musical.
There is a musical starring John Lithgow as Lawrence, Norbert Leo Butz as Freddie, Sherry Renee Scott, Joanna Gleason, I believe, and Gregory Jabara as Andre. It's very fun.
Yeah.
The University of Arkansas did it while I was in high school, and I went and saw it. And one of my favorite, two of my favorite local actor guys, the lead were Freddie and Lawrence. And then I've seen 70% of The Hustle. At the coffee shop I work at, we have a TV, big old TV that we put up. And one day, one of my coworkers, Ashley, she put up The Hustle, and so I watched it in between orders and stuff. So I have a vague idea of most of it. We got kind of busy, so I lost track.
Is there a filmed version of the musical? Do you know?
I don't, but I imagine there's some decent Broadway bootlegs out there.
Okay.
The album's on Spotify, and there's some catchy stuff. I hear bits of it in my head every now and then. Freddie has a love ballad where he sings, and this is vaguely pertinent. This is pertinent to Bedtime Story, but it's like, love is my legs, and you are my love, so you are my legs, my love. And I think about it once a month. It just kind of plays through my head.
Do you know when they made it into a musical?
John Lithgow was available.
Is he ever not?
He's always working.
Is he dead? I feel like that would be insensitive if he's dead. He's still with us?
You think only if he's dead that would be insensitive?
No, I mean the man has been in everything.
This is fair.
Name a movie that John Lithgow wasn't in.
Bedtime Story.
Okay, well, you have me there.
Molly, have you seen either of the remakes?
No, I have not. I have seen trailers for The Hustle. It looked cute and fun. I haven't seen it. And I think I had a vague awareness of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels because I like Steve Martin, but I have never seen the movie. So this is my first foray into this story, I guess.
So just some fun facts for this is mostly for me and our mutual friend Callie Derryberry, who's a fellow obsessive over just factoids. Dirty Rotten Scoundrels the musical came out in 2004. Music and lyrics by David Yazbek, who wrote The Band's Visit, one of the greatest musicals to come out in the last 10 years. Other notable Broadway replacements, Jonathan Pryce from a lot of stuff, but mostly as one of the most reprehensible people on Game of Thrones, took over for Lawrence. Lucy Arnaz took over for Muriel Eubanks, one of Lawrence's marks, being Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's daughter.
Yeah, wow.
Richard Kind took over as Andre.
Oh, I would have loved to see that.
Yes! I love him so much.
So 2004
is
when we got that.
I had never seen this movie either, but I had watched the old Dirty Rotten Scoundrels as a kid, as a movie that my father loved or said that he loved and made us watch. And I loved it, and I've seen it a couple of times. But I'd never seen this, but I was surprised by how similar they were up into a very important point.
Mm.
That's all I'll say about that. That's all I will say about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It is the redeeming quality of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels that this movie lacks.
Big agree. And I know how to talk about that and still keep it spoiler free for your kids.
Because I'm torn because I want to know what's different because I have a theory, but I also don't want to spoil anything. I don't know.
Wade, have you seen this movie before?
No, I've never seen any of these movies before. I've never seen anything, and I realize that it's a very dangerous game picking a series that I know nothing about. There was a certain point in this movie we watched that I was like, do we have to cancel the whole series? Can we talk about this?
I don't think you get canceled for talking about problematic culture. I don't know. Maybe we do. Maybe we will. But I don't think you... I don't
think enough people know what this movie is to truly understand on site what's going on with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's worth diving into, though. I think it's worth getting into the guts of it, and like talking about like, was this movie like especially sexist and problematic and like bad towards folks with different abilities back in the day? Or was this like accepted filmmaking at the time?
Yeah, I'm interested to discuss that.
As we mentioned, this movie is called Bedtime Story. It is about two con men, one who is a young American and one who is an older British man, who both make their living by conning women into sleeping with them and then stealing or being given or otherwise procuring their jewelry and expensive items and then selling them, presumably. And these two men who are entirely separate have been doing that, meet each other and start to work together. And then the second half of the movie is sort of having a bet, a contest to see who can achieve a certain mark first, them in conflict with each other. That is the setup of the film. It was directed by Ralph Levy, who was a sitcom director. This is his first film and only one of two that he'd ever made. But he directed the pilot of I Love Lucy, and he won the Emmy for Best Directing in 1960, a few years before this came out. So he was like a big TV director. This was his first film.
I think that shows because it feels like a TV movie, even for the 60s. Because when I read you the other names of movies from 1964, you're going to be like, oh, those are movies. This looks like a TV show the whole way through. Just in like its production quality.
And vignette, the way that it cuts from scene to scene.
Yeah, I just feel like overall it definitely, like, that helps knowing that it was his first film. That makes a lot of sense because it some formatting, so it's just like a lot of the setup things didn't necessarily come through, and I don't know exactly how to explain it, but like, yes, the fact that that was his first movie definitely shows, not necessarily in a bad way, but it definitely shows, and that helps make sense of a lot of stylistic things for me.
Yeah, there's a shot when they're in the German house where I swear you can see like the studio set ceiling at the top of the frame. You can tell that the camera is just pulled back too much. You can see the rafters in it. This film was written by Stanley Shapiro, who won 3 Oscars, or was nominated 3 times, won for Pillow Talk, a Doris Day
that's
comedy.
A very cute movie. I've seen that one.
He wrote it with Paul Henning, who's the other man who also wrote this movie, who is mostly a TV guy. He created the Beverly Hillbillies.
Also very familiar.
There's a score by Hans J. Salter.
Wait, there's a score in this movie?
It just sounded like music when you're on hold. Like this whole score got appropriated by dentists' offices across the nation.
I swear it does not sound like there's music in most of it.
It's like if you were outside at a party and inside they were playing The Girl from Ipanema and you pressed like a glass up to the door to try to hear what was going on. Like that's what the score was to me. Because like it vaguely had a little bit of like that ba da 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 ba ba da do 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 do. But then it just kind of like took a weird little journey away on its own. And I might be being too generous there.
I remember no music whatsoever. I only remember sound effects. Yeah, I remember a lot of sound effects and like little like cues or motifs or something. Basically like the equivalent of like when someone gets hit on the head in Looney Tunes. But I truly do not remember any music.
Oh man.
This film runs, I am reading, 1 hour and 39 minutes, which is news to me since it certainly felt like 4 hours.
Wade, this movie or the Snyder Cut? If you had to watch one of them again, which would you pick?
I legitimately have thought about this. The Snyder Cut did feel faster.
That was the Flash. That was just the Flash.
Probably would not choose it, but...
Yeah, I do think, if I may, I do think that's interesting because it was a comedy. I just felt like there were no jokes. Like there were moments, there were a couple really good jokes. There were like 3 really solid setup payoff, like very good street jokes, like good. Like there was one towards the beginning where Andre's like she has this many dollars and this many, she's this old, whatever, and And Lawrence is like, 36, 37, 38, good measurement. Something like that. It was very funny. I found that very funny. That's the only joke I remember from the movie. And I think just it's a comedy. It's supposed to feel fast and feel funny, and it never really did. The jokes all kind of just sat there, except for that one that I remembered. So I found that very off-putting, and it definitely made the film feel longer.
I agree, and I think there's a really good reason why. I think no one knows. None of the actors are in the same movie. That's my take on this.
No.
None of the actors are like in the same world. They don't know what world they're in. Marlon Brando thinks he's in like a golden age romance, but he's got all this schlocky stuff to play. And David Niven thinks he's in a Noel Coward play, which works, which is what this feels like it should be.
Yes.
And then like everything else is just a mess.
And Andre, that actor, Lawrence David Niven's like personal assistant. He was funny with his determination. He just wanted to kill somebody. God, please let me just kill somebody. I have this Nazi's gun. It still has his fingerprints on it. I will shoot this man with this Nazi's gun and blame it on the Nazi.
That was a good joke. That was a great joke.
However, can we please? It's never like, what? How did he get this? This man pulls out this gun and says, "This gun belonged to Hermann Goering. It has his fingerprints on it. I will use it." And no one is like, "What belonged to who?" I'm sorry. Where did you? How?
He clearly killed Hermann Goering. Like,
it was the 60s in Europe. It was a wild time.
Just Nazi handguns lying around. You could find them on the beach.
Yikes! And also, I'm sorry. This movie did not feel like a 60s movie. It felt like a 50s movie. I think in several ways, because I've been thinking, like, oh, what other 60s movies have I seen? Have I liked? And the one that I keep going back to is Charade, which is an incredible film starring Audrey Hepburn, Cary Grant, and Walter Matthau. It is an excellent time. That movie, in my remembering anyway, feels decades ahead of this movie that we all just watched. And it came out a full year earlier.
It's like bouncy and sexy and like moves along and like a million things happen in it.
It's hilarious. It's also like, it's a thriller. It is actually, I've seen it several times, and there are moments where it does genuinely kind of scare me, but it's still a comedy.
Zach, I believe you had a thought.
I did. I was holding on to it. So Emmett talking about how it doesn't feel like any of these actors are in the same movie prompted me onto like a little swirl of like two separate thoughts. One is where Marlon Brando is in his career in this movie is like he is aged out of I saw the phrase androgynous heartthrob era of Marlon Brando and like Streetcar and his bodice ripper type of self. And he hasn't become the full-throated, whatever the Godfather and Apocalypse Now version of Marlon Brando is. And like you think about the arc that takes him from A to Z on his career span, it's just bizarre. I mean, like what an odd level of growth. So he's in this, like, it feels like it's a growing pain of Marlon Brando because this is an era, like you talk about Brando's most famous roles, right? It's either the beginning or the end. The stuff in the middle, like the nearest thing that I think anybody's going to bring up is maybe Guys and Dolls, but I don't think they're going to bring that up because it was Brando.
Oh, I forgot. He's
in
Sky.
Guys and Dolls?
Yeah, he's in Guys and Dolls.
Masterson with Sinatra.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
The 60s are a rough time for Brando. He like signed like a 5-picture deal with Universal, which he had never done because it was part of his, like, this is the phase of his career where he's become disillusioned with acting, and he's like, I'm just going to do it for money. I'm not really going to care. So he signed this deal where he was just like, yeah, whatever you want to put me in, I'll do it. And this is, I think, 2 or 3 in that deal, this movie.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Especially if it was 3.
Oh, yeah.
when you're just halfway done. It's the Wednesday of the Brandoverse.
I did not find Brando particularly charming in this movie.
Right.
He was absolutely supposed to be charming, because how else is his con going to work?
How else does it work?
You have to rely on charm and charisma. And I will say, I do think his grift, is very good. And I think that plays into time period specifically, because when else after this, anyway, could you do something like that? To just go use an old camera, take a picture of some lady's house, show it to her 5 minutes later, and say, my grandmother grew up here. And they just believe you, because there's no way to check. And it's in Europe too. And so I don't know if like the use of a phone book even was something that could have, so I do think that grift specifically is pretty solid. But even then, he's just kind of like this guy. He doesn't have a lot of charm. He doesn't have a lot of charisma. He's just kind of like, no way, my grandmother used to live in this house. And you're like, oh, what? No. Yes? Wow. Come sleep with me. It's very, I don't know. I think his character was supposed to have a lot of, there we go again, charm and charisma, and he just didn't. He was very, like, forward about stuff and, like, kind of blunt and just there, which is brought up later. I mean, that's supposed to contrast with David Niven's character, but even then, what it was about him that ultimately sealed the deal for these grifts and cons, I really don't know.
Yeah, I would agree. And I do think it's interesting what you say about how it's supposed to be a counterpoint to David Niven's character and the way that is a much smoother, slicker, more charming sort of a guy. I guess what we're supposed to believe, and like this is just me putting myself in the head of the 1964 producer, is that like this guy is so sexy that we're supposed to believe that people just fell for it. But like I agree with you that I don't actually think that about this version of Brando. But maybe they were just like going off his star power?
That's very possible. Because, like, to be perfectly honest, I haven't seen very many Brando films, but in my head, he's, especially earlier, Brando is very much like this incredibly, like a different kind of suave, a very sexy, very alluring kind of person. And, like, yes, definitely, I mean, especially seeing as he so famously played Stanley in Streetcar, a certain kind of masculinity as well, a very kind of like macho sort of vibe, but like that appeal of Brando just did not come through for me in this movie, and I feel like it should have, and it didn't.
It wasn't supposed to be him, right? When I was doing a little bit of research on this movie, which I see Wade nodding, so yes. So it was supposed to be Gregory Peck as Lawrence. This would be 2 years after Atticus Finch. And then it was supposed to be Tony Curtis as Freddy. Ooh. And Tony Curtis, I looked at Tony Curtis's resume at the time, and what he was doing was big thing for the theater geeks, Boeing. He was playing Bernard, the guy who has...
Yes!
Tony Curtis playing this very specific type of womanizer who has 3 different flight attendants from 3 different countries in his massive Paris apartment on a revolving door basis, and then they all show up at the apartment at one time, right? So he's a scumbag. He's like not abusing, but like he's lying to these women. I mean, it is an abuse, but with that, and he is like, but he's still charming, right? It's still a charming role because it's a farce. And so Boeing is written to have us like follow along and like still root for him to work it out, even though he has all these women who they believe they're exclusive with him rotating through his apartment. So like it was for Tony Curtis and Gregory Peck and Tippi Hedren, I think, who could not get free.
Birds?
And because, as Wade mentioned, yes, birds, studio...
You saying she couldn't get free birds?
She couldn't get free bird.
Boo.
Studios held actors in like
I already regret it.
I don't. the way studios would hold these actors in like a vice grip. They couldn't get free. They couldn't arrange it.
Yeah, Tippi Hedren was with Hitchcock.
Yeah. So, and he just like wouldn't let her go. And then I think
she was on this deal that she would only be in Hitchcock movies.
Again, back to, it feels like none of them are in the same movie. None of them were supposed to be there.
This film was released June 10th, 1964 by Universal Pictures. I could not find any budget for it, but it made $3 million at the box office, which is the equivalent of $26 million today. So it was, at best, sort of a modest success. I can't imagine they spent much on making it.
No.
It looks like about $5. But would you like to hear some other movies from 1964? 1964, highest grossing films, backed by popular demand. Mary Poppins at number 1, coming in with $31 million. And she also wins Best Actress, Julie Andrews, for the Academy Awards for this, for the portrayal of Miss Poppins. Number 2 goes to My Fair Lady, another movie musical. So the number 1 and number 2 slots in 1964 are movie musicals, which is wild to me.
For My Fair Lady, the stage musical, it on Broadway originally starred Julie Andrews and Rex Harrison. Rex Harrison was cast in the film adaptation as Professor Henry Higgins, and Julie Andrews was not. They went with another favorite of the 60s, Audrey Hepburn, who is not a strong singer. So her voice was dubbed. I don't remember by who. And so it's tricky because My Fair Lady swept the Oscars that year, but it's sort of up, it's a little bit up in the air, because I do think Julie Andrews was 100% deserving of that win for Mary Poppins. Honestly, I think it's a very different role for her, and I think she's very strong in it. But it's a little bit of we're sorry we didn't put you in My Fair Lady, even though you already did the show. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword thing there, because it's like, yes, I do think she's perfectly deserving of the win for Mary Poppins, but it was like, studios feeling bad that they gave the role to someone who wasn't her, even though I think Audrey does wonderful. I think she's perfect in that movie too.
Thank you for that. That's welcome. A fascinating tidbit. At our number 3 slot in this rundown is the film Goldfinger, which is I believe the 4th James Bond, the 3rd Sean Connery James Bond, rest in peace to a legend. So I would just say overall, like looking at this movie and its treatment and depiction of women, looking at the James Bond movies on this list, at least, I would say it's about on par with other 1960s movies. Probably better, honestly, in the movie musical region than it is in the action or adult drama comedy. I've seen a couple of these. I've seen at least a couple of the Pink Panthers, Goldfinger, and Mary Poppins off this list. All of those movies, I would say, are of a much higher quality, at least in filmmaking, than this film is, if not in like gender politics or, cultural correctness or what have you.
Bedtime Story refuses to acknowledge directly that it's about sex, right? Like it shies away from it. The closest we get is a weird conversation between Lawrence and his Mark, who gets the most attention, where they just cut to it's this pillow talk conversation between Lawrence and his Mark, and it's this painting of a Spanish bullfighter and a gored bull. Very charming, lovely conversation post pillow talk. He's being the suave guy, but it refuses to talk about and acknowledge that it's a movie about sex, which is very bizarre to me, since James Bond is about sex and power and more stuff too, sure. But we fully acknowledge it, right? So clearly, as a society, we're looking at this moment of forward advancement of consideration of we can look at sex, we can consider sex in our movies, we can acknowledge it in our pop culture. And so for this movie to rob women of any agency whatsoever at any point, but also to just ignore sex when the title of the movie, Bedtime Story, to me makes no sense at all. I don't understand why that's the title of this movie unless it's about the sexual connections.
Yeah.
I do think the title is curious. and the way that they set up the film, that opening credit sequence, visually, I thought was really nice on it. Like, just looking at it, I was like, oh, it's an animated storybook, and it's like a pop-up book, and it's pretty. And they set it up like a fairy tale of like, once upon a time, there was a prince who wasn't really a prince, but everyone thought he was a prince. And then there was also a wolf who was just a wolf. So, but then there's no, like, they do that little setup, and then that's it.
Then there's no moral, there's no wrap up, there's nothing.
Yeah, it was odd. I do feel that sort of fairy tale pop-up book setup did not go anywhere.
Okay, this film got mostly negative reviews.
What? Really?
No
oh my
kidding.
God.
It has a 54 on Metacritic, which is compiled from 3 reviews. Which were from TV Guide, The New York Times, and Variety.
Wow! Imagine getting reviewed by Variety and The New York Times.
And TV Guide.
Variety writes, Bedtime story will divert the less discriminating, although there are times when even such major league performers as Marlon Brando and David Niven have to strain to sustain the overall meager romantic comedy material.
Ooh. Wow. Well, I'm glad we're all on the same page here.
Well, having said that, I guess we'll start with Molly. Bedtime story, flop or bop?
Oh, flop. For several reasons. I mean, I think the film was pretty visually. It was very nice, very summertime, you know. And that's really the main good thing I have to say about it. I would love to discuss further the treatment of women in this film, especially when we're looking at the other top two, not other top two, but the top 2 films for that year of Mary Poppins and My Fair Lady. My Fair Lady, there's a lot of debate of like, is Pygmalion a feminist story? I think it is. But there's a lot to be said there. But even then, it's very clear that Eliza has agency, at least like in a certain way in this movie. What? No, it's so weird. It's very, very strange. It's very strange, and I think the ending is really abrupt. Eventually there, when we talk about like character comparison between David Niven's and Brando's characters, I think it was all just so like basic. And like some things we've touched on, like the, student and the master and like learning from each other. And we see how David Niven's character uses he has larger marks, getting more money and using his funds to support artists and small businesses in the town where he lives. So he sort of like uses his money for noble causes, even though, he gets it in less than noble means. Whereas Brando's character is kind of, it's like, okay, for this meal, and then like I got $100 for a plane ride home. It's like, okay, it's not long term. But that never felt like that only like occurred to me about half an hour ago. Maybe not even. I felt like that wasn't it wasn't discussed necessarily. I mean, it's like he showed him, it's like, here's what I do. The ballet mistress needs money to teach ballet. And Brando's like, who needs it? Outside of that, it's like like the difference is, I don't know. All this to say, I do think the film is a flop.
I do love the moment where this film turns into a surprise socialist arts PSA, though.
Yes.
That is a fun moment where David Niven is like, "What if we funded arts and artisans with all of this money that rich people are just wearing?"
Exactly.
But where is the moment where David Niven is like, "Oh, I do it for the thrill of the chase," or something like that? He's like, if he's just giving all the money away, then why is he actually doing it?
Yeah.
Because there's something deeper. Like, he doesn't seem like an altruist, He's giving the money away because he doesn't need it.
Yeah. He also lives in a chateau.
Interested in the arts, but he's not so he is doing it for something besides just like that thing he says it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I wrote the tax montage really lost me.
Oh no, that was when I was like, that's when I was in. I was like, maybe this movie is good.
That's when I was out, and I was out for the rest of the thing from there. Nothing through the end was just a slog from that point.
I will say, I really liked Janet, that actress. I don't remember. She was in The Music Man, and I can't remember her name.
Shirley Jones.
Shirley Jones! Oh my God. Yes, thank you, because she's a huge deal. I thought she did a really nice job, and I kind of kept waiting for something more to happen for her character. And here's my thought. I was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun if she was conning them the whole time? And then that never happened.
No.
She and Brando got married in this very, like, we didn't even see what, like, it just happened. And she was like, in my home, I want the husband to be the boss. And they sailed away on an ocean liner, and it was super anticlimactic and weird. Because she definitely seemed like she was in a different movie. She was pure-hearted and good and just there because she won a contest and she has having a nice vacation. But also, on that note, she was alone in a foreign country. She's young. For the 60s even, I feel like that's kind of rare. And they didn't, like, she was entirely by herself the whole time unless she was with Brando and David Niven's characters. And I found that kind of odd. Like, the more I thought about it, I was like, there's no explanation as to why she's totally by herself. Which, like, isn't something we really think about now, of course, but especially with this movie's very outdated standards, it's, like, never commented on that she's alone. Of course, the fact that she's alone makes her an easy target for these guys, but even then, I don't know, that was something that sort of stuck out to me. But all this to say, flap, 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 flip, flap, flap.
Yeah, this movie takes place in a Europe that is entirely populated by filthy rich, home-owning, single, young, white blonde women. Like, everyone we see in it is like that.
Mm-hmm.
Zach, bedtime story, flop or bop?
Ah, man. I want to bop it for what, twist it, flick it. I want to bop it for what it gave us in the future. I want to bop it for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels and Dirty Rotten Scoundrels the musical. However, when my top 3 memorable performances are a French sidekick hell-bent on homicide, a seagull...
Yes. Oh, I forgot about that.
Harriet the seagull, and that they brought her back was just very lovely. That's the woman with the most agency in the whole movie.
God, and we haven't even talked about the most, like, terrible things in this film. And yet, do we even need to? Because
I mean, I can really quick. Like, you gotta flop it because it. And I think that Dirty Rotten Scoundrels will run into future trouble with this. And I don't remember well enough in The Hustle if they copy pasted this part too. But to have Marlon Brando, Freddie pose as Lawrence's invalid brother of questionable mental health, it just, like, it was vague enough that it was never making fun of a specific thing. I'll let it rock with that. And but the strangeness of it, I think that, like, especially to translate the bit of Ruprecht, right? The basement-dwelling brother who keeps calling Lawrence's Mark's mother. And, like, to have that work, you gotta go full weird with it. Like, it's maybe, you know, like, in the musical, there's a line about how he collects his farts in a mason jar, and then he opens up the jar in front of the woman, right? Like, it's, like, stuff like that, where you're not really targeting too specifically.
And I think that Steve Martin is doing that a little bit in the 80s one, but I also think he's a little worse, honestly. And I was actually, like, comparing the two in my head as I was watching them. And I was like, oh, this is less offensive because it's less funny.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Oh, no!
Like, it is less specific and therefore like less offensive, but it also, like, doesn't work as a comedic bit.
Yep.
So, like, that's, I mean, and I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting in how, like, we laugh at transgression. And if you're transgressing a little, you're just like, oh, that's uncomfortable. If you're transgressing a lot, it's hilarious.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, because it was almost as though Brando's character was pretending to be more of a dangerous animal creature, like a goblin, than a person.
Yeah.
Because it was like the
yes.
keep smiling. No, you're not smiling. Like the women had to keep a smile, keep a grin, and then he was like, no, don't, like, no biting, Ruprecht. So, but it was weird, and it was short.
Oh, you'll need to get that looked at.
Oh yes, he's not contagious that we know of. What was odd as well, I think the Ruprecht segment was shorter than the Patron of the Arts montage. And that reads weird for a comedy film like this.
That's true.
But it was also like, thank God it was short because it was hard to watch.
Wade, mark it down 42 minutes and 20 seconds. A strangely damning thing from the review from TV Guide in 1964 is lots of silliness, a contest for Shirley's affections, Brando posing as a cripple, always lots of laughs, and more. Lighthearted but heavy-handed, good work by all the second bananas, and a nice score by Salter. What? The heck?
Nice work by all the second bananas?
Yeah, so, like, and I agree with that. Honestly, like, Andre, like, the homicidal Frenchman, that's, and Harriet, the seagull. Here we go. That's good.
The, wheelchair situation, which is, like, the main part of the movie.
Yeah.
Is so tricky. It's so like I frankly I'm not really sure how to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
Like his Brando Freddy's story about how he ended up, how he came to be in a wheelchair. Like maybe, I mean, it doesn't like redeem it entirely. I don't even know if that's the right word, but the like that his story that it's entirely psychological because he was fake. He, you know, the story of like, oh, I was engaged and she ran away with a dancer. So now, and I thought about it too much. What was it? He had a nightmare or something, and then he woke up and he can't walk anymore because it pains him to see people dancing. It's an incredibly silly story that, again, no one will believe unless you are charming and charismatic, which Freddy is not, as we have already established, which is sort of like, oh no, Janet has no brain, or she's too trusting, which is a better way to think about it. So maybe like he put himself there. I don't know. It's a very tricky thing. I will say I think the image of him being completely buried in the sand, save for his head, with the seagull is funny. Was it worth all of this very tricky wheelchair material to get to that moment? No, it wasn't.
And we will see how that ages in the 80s one, which I think also has at least some parts of that, because I remember the part where Steve Martin is walking out of the wheelchair.
Yeah.
It is like this interesting thing in like plays like this. I feel like this is a trope in plays of like the person who's pretending to not be able to walk and then miraculously can, but it's not really a miracle because it's been a grift the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Is like a thing that happens a lot in plays. I don't think that like redeems it as a trope, but I also think there's an interesting like look at like are you like making fun of people who have to use wheelchairs? I do think there are a couple of those kind of jokes in this movie. Or are you making fun of this guy who's pulling a grift and put himself in a wheelchair to do this grift and like the situations that he has like not suspected running into in that situation.
Yes.
Which I think is like kind of interesting. And so I don't know where I fall on that as a trope. I think in this movie it doesn't always work.
I think you're absolutely spot on with that. The greatest joke that works from the chunk of time where Freddy is in the wheelchair is when David Niven as the doctor takes his stick, his walking stick, and just like wallops the heck out of Freddy's legs, and like Brando just has to like hold it in and morphs his weird flexible face and like
he tickles his feet.
He tickles his feet, right? Like because it's making fun of Freddy, of the bad guy, and not of folks with disabilities, folks in wheelchairs. So it's like a comedy, and this is a different soapbox for a different day, but like comedy is about, to me, sincerity and what you do with that sincerity. And I think that empathy and sincerity, like you can't create authentic comedy. You can probably create like cringe comedy. You can create stuff like that. And like, I will admit that I'm not above laughing at a cringe comedy moment or two, even from this abomination. But like, if you want comedy that will endure, I think you need to create it with sincerity and empathy and an understanding of what you're doing, and not reaching for the lowest fruit.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I agree with you there, Emmett. Yeah.
Yeah, that's well said, Zach. I was also greatly disturbed by the brother thing. And then when he comes in a wheelchair, my first reaction was like, oh, we need to cancel the miniseries. I was like, there's no value whatsoever that could possibly come out of us discussing something as like horribly offensive as this.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you realize that the bit he is trying to pull off is that he is someone who has emotionally lost the ability to walk.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that is the funniest thing in the movie to me, but it's not funny in the movie because they never pull it off. It's just funny thinking about it.
No, it never
works.
That's the thing, is this movie is filled with setups that don't go anywhere.
Luckily, about 20 years later, 2 great actors will come along and pick up all of those setups.
Yes.
I am interested. Like,
three great actors, actually.
What was it that they were like, oh, this terrible movie from the 60s, let's do it again? Like, what? I mean, still haven't, as we discussed, I have not seen Dirty Rotten Scoundrels yet, but I would like to, especially to cross compare with this terrible film we all watched, to figure out, like, why this?
Emmett, flop or bop?
Well, it's a good thing that we waited this long to ask me this question. But I will say flop. If you'd asked me earlier, I really enjoyed watching this movie. Despite all of its numerous flaws.
Watching bad movies is fun.
But I enjoyed it for the reason that I've enjoyed a lot of X-Men movies, which is that they remind me of other better movies. Specifically, the other Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, which I guess is almost, until like the third act twist, like a dead remake.
Almost word for word, I believe.
Yeah, like almost word for word in the first, 3 quarters?
Uh-huh.
So yeah, flop. I love David Niven in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
He was my favorite part, I think, and the seagull.
Wait, flop or bop?
It's a flop for me, for sure.
Oh.
I kind of enjoyed some of the bits before they got together. And everything from there on was pretty bad for me. Even if you take away all the problematic stuff, it's just not well made.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not.
No.
Like, even if you were to turn off that part of your brain and you would be like, it was a different time, whatever people say, like, there's just isn't anything of value there still.
No.
It's like a bad high school production.
Oof.
With one good actor in it and one other actor who's usually good, but in this production is drunk.
Yeah. Well, it's like they had to cast him up. Like he's usually playing the dads, and it's like he's always really good at playing the dads. I don't understand why he was bad as Freddy. Or no, Freddy would be the yeah, whatever. Blah.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you.
I wanted to take this time to read Joan Didion's review of this movie in Vogue.
Oh, wow.
Who you may remember from a few episodes ago. We talked about her on our Lady Bird episode. This is pretty long, so stick with me. This is just selections from it, but I think it shows what the reaction was at the time. Some things just aren't as funny as they once were, and many of those things are movies. A Stanley Shapiro movie generally depends neither upon dialogue nor upon situation and dialogue, but upon situation alone. And this latest movie is no exception. A kind of prolonged sick joke, Bedtime Story places Marlon Brando, David Niven, and Shirley Jones in front of some boldly fraudulent process shots of the French Riviera, and then proceeds to milk the notion that there's something pretty funny about Marlon Brando impersonating A, a mental defective, and B, a hysterically crippled veteran. Typically, part of the joke is not exactly in the story, but irrelevant to it, an inside joke. It is supposed to strike the audience. It is supposed to strike the audience as hilarious and hippie that Brando, whose first movie role was that of a paraplegic in The Men, is back in his wheelchair.
Huh.
Let me say that anyone who believes that situation is all there is comedy ought to be made to sit, once is enough, through Bedtime Story.
Oh my god.
Joan Didion's knives were out.
Dude, knives out.
But this is the thing, and I find this generally always to be true, is that whenever we look back at something and we're like, wow, that was really messed up, almost always people back then were like, this is really messed up too.
That's comforting in a way.
Good. Like that's, that feels good.
Incredible.
Did Joan Didion write up Dirty Rotten Scoundrels? Because I'm curious about that.
I don't know. I'll have to find out next week.
I remember earlier, like much earlier, the movie Pillow Talk was brought up, and I said, "Oh, cute movie." I watched that a really long time ago, and just in case it doesn't hold up at all, maybe it wasn't good. I don't know, but it's Doris Day, and I think Rock Hudson. I remember I was like in middle school maybe seeing it at my grandparents' house, and I was like, oh, this is cute, I like it. But I don't know, maybe if I went back and watched it now, I wouldn't. I'm not really sure. But I just want to put that disclaimer out there.
I feel like this whole podcast could be, I liked it at the time. But if it didn't age well...
Where are we now?
Who do we think is the protagonist of this film?
Harriet the Seagull.
And what do they want?
To feed
Marlon Brando.
I guess it's Brando's character, but it could be a dual protagonist movie because they both, in terms of like screen time or whatever, it's pretty equally shared there. And then they also, in theory, learn and grow from each other. I don't know that we really see much of that, except at the end where David Niven is like, oh, I suppose he's the happier man with one woman, but those of us like me with several women must continue on in our unhappy lives. And I'm like, what? So you didn't learn anything.
I think David Niven should be the protagonist, and I think that we lose the growth, right? We lose the greatest potential for growth. Because in situations like this, where I don't see one, I like to try and go for like the old standby of who grows the most, who changes the most. And like Freddy changes in that he is cowed, but he's still a 1 hour 40 seconds Wade. He's still a when it comes down to it, right? So he doesn't really grow or change at all. David Niven Lawrence, however, has a moment where he goes, the grift is off. Protect the girl. We're not going to do this to this poor sweet girl, right? He has this like little Jiminy Cricket moment. Except to me, our little socialism parade of support the arts undermines that. Because we previously see that he does have a conscience.
Because it shows that he's got a conscience. Yeah. Oh, interesting.
So if you get rid of that, and I spent that whole little like window shopping scene of the silversmith and the ballet and all of that. I was like, these are all plants, these are all marks, these are all people he's paying off to do something to Freddy, and that's just me having far too much confidence in this movie. By having him do that. Right, we already know he's capable of caring, even so slightly. Right, it's a lost art form. It'll die with him. Like there's a ruefulness to that, and so his change of heart revolving Janet, like, doesn't mean anything anymore. So I guess it should be Lawrence. It should be David Niven.
I think that this. I agree with you, Zach. That I think this movie is confused about who the protagonist is. And, like, it should be Lawrence. Well, it should be one of them more clearly than the other, than it is. And neither of them grows or learns a ton in it. So it's kind of hard to do your little trick on it. Because, as you say, they both remain pretty much the same at the end. I think this movie starts and ends with Lawrence. And so sometimes when I can't take anything else, I go with that. I'll say it starts as his story. It opens with his hands. It ends with him like talking to the camera and walking away. So I could be convinced that it's him. The problem with that is that I'm much clearer on what Marlon Brando wants. And what his character wants is to be the top goof on the goof heap, daddy-o. Wade, do you have any good ideas about what it is?
I have no ideas, and I don't necessarily care to. Well, we're talking about the end. The end is so weird. It is so weird because it just feels like, because it happens off screen. Marlon's character transformation happens off screen, and it feels like it's another con. That's just what I assumed, because the whole movie is a con. Yeah. So you assume that he's playing him in some way by saying this, and then it isn't, which isn't just like bad writing. It's writing that is out of step with the rest of the movie. Yeah. Like it is doing something the rest of the movie is not doing. And if it isn't a con, and he really did fall in love, where is the scene where he has to tell her that he was cheating her and he's a liar, but he really fell in love with her and let's be together? Like, where is that scene? You know?
Yeah, it doesn't go full in on the wholesome comedy either.
Yeah. No. It ends by saying he's happier, but he looks miserable when we see him on the ship.
Well, because they do this thing where she's there and she's saying, like, I grew up in a house where the husband was the boss and I want my life to be just like that. And he goes, yes, dear. And so everything she says, saying like, oh, you're in charge, you're the boss, I'm just a weak woman. His only response is like, yes, dear. Yes, honey. Yes. And that is the joke. Because it's she's saying she wants the husband to be in charge, but he is just agreeing with her. So like, really, who's in charge? You know? So that's like kind of the joke there, but it's such an old joke.
Yeah, and if you're not ringing any changes on it, like, what the hell?
It's not, because it's not subverting anything, and it's not new, and it's not funny. Anyway, sorry to yell. And then I also love the cutaway from the ocean liner back to David Niven's character in his chateau, that as he looks out the window at the ocean liner, that it is a painting, and they did nothing to hide that fact. And I always like find that a little bit fun, like in older films, or that like, oh, this is a prop, this is a set painting, but in this case, like, there's no like, it is just a painting behind that window. There is no attempt to make you think otherwise, and I found that very funny.
Molly, who was your favorite character in this movie other than the protagonist? Or the dual protagonist? I guess we'll take Marlon and David off the table. Who is your favorite other than them?
I honestly enjoyed, I don't know if she was my favorite, but I enjoyed Fanny of Omaha, who shows up early in the movie as one of Lawrence's marks, who is, they do this grift of like accidentally revealing that he's the prince and like, oh, no one can know and please don't bother him. And of course she's like, what? I know a secret now. You can trust me. But she was just so like, just this like genuinely sweet Midwestern busybody kind of lady who was just enjoying being part of something. And I thought the actress who played her was very endearing and funny. And, she's part of how Brando finds out that David Niven's character is also a con man, just like he is. And then the ball gets rolling. So I don't know that she was necessarily my favorite, but I found her fun. And we haven't talked about her much on here yet. So shout out to Fanny of Omaha.
Zach, who's your MVP?
It's going to be a tie, but I'll have to give Harriet Siegel honorable mention. just utterly charmed by her work. And then I would say Andre, Lawrence's right-hand man, my precious, precocious, dogged and determined homicidal Frenchman. Like, I really dug what he was laying down for us. Again, my favorite joke is...
I agree.
Here's the pistol of I'm a dead Nazi. His fingerprints are still on it. And when they say, who killed this man? Oh my God, it was this dead Nazi. They'll be like, how'd he do that? We don't know. End of story. Like, that's it. Like, what an amazing solution. What an amazing hype man. What an amazing, like, backup plan. Like, he's just got that pistol wrapped in, like, a precious white cloth, sitting in a box, like, in his, like, shed, ready to go.
He was in the Boy Scouts of whatever country he's from.
Yeah, right? He was the Boy Scout of France. He's, yeah.
Emmett, who's your MVP?
I don't know. Were there even any other characters in this movie? I will say, I think that I'm going to have to go with the first girl that Marlon Brando pulls his gag on, his like grift on with the house. She is just like, I mean, to play that stupid, to play a character that is just that taken in by everything is really difficult.
Yeah.
And I think she does it reasonably. I think she does it like really well. I think as far as like a terribly problematic depiction of like just female gullibility, awful. But was her acting good? Probably.
No thoughts. Head empty.
Emmett, your MVP, the actress was Cynthia Lynn. This is her only film performance. She got pregnant on the set of this movie, had a child shortly after the movie came out, and after Marlon Brando's death, her daughter revealed that she was Marlon Brando's child.
Oh my god.
What?
Oh my god!
Wow! That dog. What the hell?
So, Emmett,
wait,
is there anything you'd like to ask me?
Yes,
Emmett?
I would love to ask you, who is your MVP, OT, MB, or DN?
Well, it was the butler. He's the best performance in this movie by far. But since he's taken, I'm going to go with, I have written down here, Jason Schwartzman as the taxi driver.
The beefcake guy who comes and picks him up.
The hottie with the mustache who has to carry Marlon Brando around in one scene.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
It's like he's so strong.
Says absolutely nothing.
When I first saw him in this film, I was like, is that a real person? I literally thought it was an animatronic.
That's where all the budget went.
Incredible.
All right, Emmett, should we play Bum's the Word?
All right, let's play Bum's the Word.
Okay, this is our game where we find similar movies to the one we watch and try to guess them. We normally source this through IMDb, but after our true hatred and complete failure of IMDb last week, we're looking for new sources. This week, I found through the website bestsimilar.com, which I would not recommend, but it has told me, if you like Bedtime Story, you are looking for clever movies about gigolo, rivalry, prince, con artists, seduction, bet, and farce.
Gigolo.
That's
Accordingly, I have here 6 movies. 6 movies that Best Similar says are bet. And we're going to see how many of them we can name. Everyone's playing together.
That are similar to this movie on the basis of betting?
That have some number of characters who are engaged in a bet, which is a primary plot line in the movie. That's the unifying theme between these 6 movies and Bedtime Story. I tried to pick ones that I thought you guys would know. So,
All right.
Are there any Oceans movies in there? Oceans 11 through 13?
There were some on the list, but I did not pick any.
Okay.
I'm going to guess My Fair Lady.
Oh, wow. So I give you guys hints, but My Fair Lady was on there, so you've gotten one without even any prompt.
Hints is great. That's so much.
I didn't know there were hints. I'm so sorry.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so that's 1 of 6 down. Okay, the second film is a 1983 comedy. It's sort of 2 leading roles, 2 leading men like this movie, and one of them was like the most popular stand-up comic at the time. This is a movie that recently sort of became relevant again because of some real-world news that happened at the start of this year.
There's so much news.
This is also a Christmas movie.
Oh, it's Die Hard. But it's not Die Hard. It's
no, it's not Die Hard.
Definitely not. I'm sorry. I just listened to a podcast about Die Hard, so it's on my mind. But it has nothing to do with bets, so I don't really know why.
You said
1983.
1983.
1983, straight up comedy.
Christmas. One of the lead actors is the most popular stand-up comic of 1983.
Yeah, of that era.
Okay.
Scrooged? Was that?
Oh, is it Trading Places?
It is Trading Places.
Trading Places.
Wow.
Okay, the third movie here. This is a 2019 film. It's described as a crime thriller. I'm not sure if I would say that. It's a New York movie. It's a Jewish film.
Is it Uncut Gems?
It is Uncut Gems.
What? A New York
In what
movie.
world? Well, what connects them for me is that I disliked both of them.
Okay, this fourth one is from 2000. It's a British film. It is a gangster comedy. It's one of the first films from a very famous director now.
Snatch, right? Is it Snatch?
Yes!
Yeah.
It is Snatch.
Yeah, Guy Ritchie.
It is Snatch. Okay, we got two more. This one is a 2012. It's called a rom-com. I think that's a little bit misleading. It's from a famous quirky director. It is based on a novel.
Quirky director. Oh, is it a Wes Anderson?
It's not Wes Anderson.
Okay.
He's a little more realistic than Wes Anderson, but sort of stylized. He's a guy who sort of every time he makes a movie, which isn't that frequent, they get a lot of Oscars. This is starring an actress who is on a run of like getting nominated for Best Actress every single year. A young actress playing much older in this movie.
Was this American Hustle?
You've got the director. It's not American Hustle.
David O. Russell.
Oh, was this... Wait, 2012?
Is that Silver Linings? Did he do Silver Linings Playbook?
It is Silver Linings. Silver Linings Playbook.
Is there a bet in there?
Yeah, they do like a
dancing.
dance competition.
Oh, huh.
And the last movie in our bet series is a 1999 teen movie. It is... Ooh, how to say this without giving too much away? It's sort of a trendsetter in terms of style. It's adapted from a play.
Is it 10 Things I Hate About You?
It is 10 Things I Hate About
10
You.
Things I Hate About You.
Yes!
Oh, we...
99.
Good
Wow,
flex.
congrats. Congrats to everyone on winning Bum's the Word.
Hey.
That is very fun. It's a very good game.
Yeah, that was good. I like this game.
Yes.
You guys were good at it before you even were playing it, so...
So
That's
sorry.
Molly, man. Molly is powerful.
I like trivia.
Molly, final thoughts? Any final thoughts here on Bedtime Story?
No? I mean, I sort of feel like we've exhausted all the thoughts that can be had about this unfortunate little film. I mean, I think I was excited to properly watch a Brando movie because I think I've seen pieces of Streetcar and I've seen Apocalypse Now. And as we know, that was not Brando at his best. So I will say, here is my final thought. Here it is. Was Ruprecht a small little future glimpse for Apocalypse Now Brando? Who can say? Maybe. There's that. Terrible.
Zach, final thoughts?
Yeah, I appreciate the blueprint that it gave us for Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. I think ultimately it was entirely toothless, and that's why none of it succeeded. Tried to just kind of gum and gnaw its way through, and if it had, I think, fully committed to the type of movie that it could be, we wouldn't have to go to back alley measures to find it and watch it. But thank God, you have to protect our children.
Yeah.
Emmett?
I mean, I agree. It's a bad movie. It's not good. There's plenty of other movies you could spend your time watching that would be better, especially Dirty Rotten Scoundrels, maybe, if it holds up. Yeah, that's about it. To the point about, like, is this a glimpse of him in Apocalypse Now? I thought he looked so much like the picture of the captain that he's supposed to have been in this movie. Like when he's in his army uniform.
Yeah.
He looks like who Kurtz is supposed to be, and then who you find is somebody completely different.
Well, and in this one, I don't think he had any cue cards or note cards hidden around the set.
He may have.
He
honestly.
probably did.
That's true. He did it for On the Waterfront. Wade, what were your thoughts?
I don't really have many. I liked his little purse. I liked Marlon Brando's little purse at the beginning.
He's like,
that was a real highlight for me.
Yeah.
I also like that the opening credits said Jewels by Cartier. That was fun.
Oh,
Yeah,
yes.
that was cool.
That feeling like, oh, like you're watching an older movie, because you don't see credits like that anymore. And I did actually say something out loud as we were watching that of like, oh wow, that's very funny. It also said like gowns by someone specific, just not the kinds of credits that you see, especially at the start
Jeff.
of a movie.
Gowns
And
by
so I
Jeff.
think in sort of a film history kind of way, that is fun. But yes, Jules by Cartier was very fun to see.
Yeah. I overall think that this movie is just morally appalling.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That's my main thought.
Yeah.
Zach and Molly, thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, thank
This was a blast.
for this was really delightful.
Love to come back.
We would love to have you. Any projects either of you are working on that you'd like to plug, or anywhere that people can find you online?
I have a book blog, which sounds kind of silly, but if you're ever curious about books and little reviews and recommendations, I write about those. I try to get 1 or 2 posts out per month, so that's not like a deluge of content, but look it up if you like. It's called Penny for Your Book Thoughts. Haha. And you can find me on Instagram at moneypenny96.
I have no projects coming up as a primarily theater-based artist in the midst of this wonderful panini we find ourselves in. And if you want to find more of my hot takes about sincerity and empathy in comedy and bad movies and why The Office is an abomination of God.
Oh, bring it on!
I'm here. I'm ready. I watched the whole thing just so that I could argue about it. I'm on Twitter at @PledgeDerek for reasons of being anonymous. And then I'm on Instagram at Zach Stolz, just my name. Hot takes are us.
Incredible. Well, Emmett will be back next week talking about Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yes, very excited to talk about that with you. I hope you like it better than this film. I hope I like it better than this film.
Love you guys.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Stay
Love
frosted,
y'all.
Cinema Bums is a production of DKG Podcasts. It is created and produced by Emma Temple and me, Wade Lawrence Holloman. I also edit and mix the podcast. Our theme music is by Zane Holloman, who you can find on Bandcamp, and our show art is by Autumn Beckner. Our social media is managed by Laura Bennett. If you like what you hear, please tell all your friends, and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, the 2 best ways to spread the word about our work. You can also follow us on Instagram at CinemaBums or email us at cinemabumspod@gmail.com. Don't flake on us. We'll be back next week.